Hello and welcome. This is Ben Zeller. I am one of the co-general editors of Nova Religio, the Journal of Alternative and Emergent Religions. And today we are talking with one of our authors, Todd LeVasseur, on his article, Reverend Billy and the Church of Stop Shopping, Contemporary Religious Production on a Planet Passing Tipping Points, from volume 23, number 3, the February 2020 issue. Professor LeVasseur is a visiting assistant professor of Religious Studies and Environmental and Sustainability Studies at the College of Charleston, and director of the Sustainability Literacy Institute, which is part of their Center for Sustainable Development. Welcome and thank you for talking with us.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Yes, so for those who haven't read the article, maybe not read the article yet, can you tell us a little bit about it, please?
Yes, so again, thanks for this opportunity to share my scholarship. Thank you, Ben, directly for reaching out to me and your hard work with the journal. I'm a huge fan of the journal and its status in the field, so an honor to be able to dialogue about all this. So Reverend Billy is this charismatic street preacher, if you will, and he talks a lot about unpacking the ills of fossil fuel-based capitalism and the social injustices that entail to that lifestyle. So he uses street performance as a preacher to sort of wake people out of the consumer slumber, as he titles it. So he goes against sort of fundamentalist Christianity on one hand, and then sort of consumerism on another hand. And if you think of David Loy's great article from '97, I think, Religion of the Market. So he's in that sort of slipstream of critiquing rampant value-free capitalism and the impact of that on communities, both human communities and intersectional power dynamics in those communities, but also the community of life. And so I do some, use him as a case study to analyze his preaching. So I do some discourse analysis of some of his online video presence and some of the emails he sent out. Use a lot of the books he's written directly. So he has some memoirs out there. And I analyze him using the schema of Bron Taylor's dark green religion, and so specifically Gaian animism. And so I argue Reverend Billy is an example of sort of this Gaian animist sensibility, challenging us that we better change our life ways given climate change or things are going to get really bad. And as we challenge and have to change our life ways, we need to pay attention to issues of power, social power as well. So that's sort of a snapshot of the article.
I remember when I was first reading the article, I was struck by trying to think about sort of it's framed as a religion, yet there's a certain sort of irreligiousness to it as well. Can you talk a bit about the way in which Reverend Billy both is religious and the Church of Stop Shopping both is religious, but also sort of some of the tensions there? Because I remember when I first read it thinking, okay, yeah, I get it. This is a new religion, but it's also not. And that's sort of interesting to me.
That's right. That's right. And so, I got some great comments working with you and the fellow editorial staff, and then even the peer reviewers, the anonymous reviewers. And at first I tried to frame him as like a trickster figure. Mm-hmm. And people are like, well, that's not really helpful, even though he's sort of doing cultural critique, trickster type stuff like we'd see with Adbusters or Yes Men. And so I referenced that in the article too. And I'm struck by what is, he was trained in theater as part of his background too. So what is just fake religion, but using that as a vehicle to do cultural critique. And some of the comments I got back from y'all were, well, what do we even mean by fake religion? Who says what is valid or not? And I agree with that in my analysis in the paper. Who are we to say what is? And so clearly he has a church that is formed. And they are motivated by, if we reduce religion down, and I'm really cautious of reductionist views of religion, but if we reduce it down to how religion functions in people's lives, whether it gives a meaning or brings about experiences for them, clearly what Reverend Billy is doing and the rituals he does is highly ritualistic. He is doing religion, and he is doing it prophetically. So sort of thinking Weberian here, he has charisma, and he has prophetic charisma. So very much he is doing religion. Now, it might be on the margins. There's not tons of people involved in this, but who are we as scholars to say how many people you need to have to be a religion, right? And this is, of course, why in new religious movements, we grapple with these questions, right? Is there a tipping point where, okay, now it's valid? Well, every new religion started with a small amount of people, including the dominant world religions of today. So that's not really a fair, I think, metric to bring into analyzing Reverend Billy or anybody that you all might publish in your journal.
Well, I find the argument convincing, certainly. So, yeah, good. And we certainly didn't have to publish it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. So, how did you get into this research?
Well, so this is one of my mentors down at University of Florida and their great PhD program, David Hackett. He does U.S. religious history, and he sort of says, "Yeah, I ended up researching my own interests." So I think, in a way, that's kind of what we all maybe do: is we end up being intellectually called to dig deeper into some of the stuff we might be ourselves, or are antithetical to maybe who we are, and we want to learn more about what that's all about to make sense of it. So I'm guess I'm more in the former camp of many reasons people might study things. And so I'm drawn to radical environmentalism subgroups. I'm drawn to I was in Seattle in 1999 protesting the WTO, so I'm drawn to anti-globalization discourse. I'm very concerned about climate change. I'm very concerned about the impacts, the externalities of capitalism, neoliberal capitalism has on our communities, whether those are human communities or more than human communities. So I share a lot of the same concerns Reverend Billy has. And then my training is in religion and nature and also US religions. And so this married those trainings into a case study analysis of somebody who is sort of doing this prophetic liberation spirituality, which is something else I studied for my master's with my mentor, Alistair McIntosh. I looked at the G8 protests in Scotland in 2005. And so I sort of have this background of researching sort of liberatory spiritual movements of prophetic activism that are specifically going after abuses of power,
Mm.
and at the same time inviting us to rethink our connection with the natural world. And Reverend Billy brings all of that together in a really vibrant, fun, compelling package. He's brilliant. And so just, I learned by researching him. He made me think differently about the world and my role in my own community. And so, I don't take an objective view of my scholarship or teaching or anything I do. So I was thankful to be able to develop further layers of a critical analysis of power by researching him too, which I think is helpful, and we should be open to as scholars.
So as someone who already had thought a lot about these ideas and sort of had already done research in the same area, were you surprised by anything doing the research? Was there anything which sort of just you weren't expecting?
Well, good question. So I was not surprised. I was thankful for some of the early feedbacks. I think this went through like maybe four back and forths with you and the editorial team, and it helped refine a lot down. So my initial analysis, again, I mentioned like sort of a trickster figure. Um, I had to learn more about the scholarship of new religious movements to
Mm.
to better situate him, and that was really helpful. Um, and then I was lucky in that some good work came out while I was writing this. So one was Sarah Pike's book on looking at Earth Liberation Front and Earth First as religion, and so her idea of a ruptural performance, I think, was a helpful lens I was able to bring in. And then seeing Reverend Billy's trajectory over his time. So when he first started out, he was focused more on social issues, and over time he's become much more involved with environmental issues and now marries them together. And so his memoir came out, and that was a data point, the primary source I didn't have access to when I first started the project. And so using Bron Taylor's dark green religion schema to really analyze that, I was surprised in how much Reverend Billy very much matched up to a Nogaian animist sensibility. And so, the other thing that wasn't surprising to me, but sort of I end the article thinking through, is how is climate change going to impact religious production moving forward? And I think we will only continue to see that. And so, yeah, I'm not going to argue Reverend Billy is going to blow up. He's not. I think he's a niche. So if you look at religion as an economy of religion, we have a First Amendment, so there's no state sponsored. How are you going to recruit people? He's never going to have a huge following. And I've never talked to him, but I don't think that is really his goal. So he's a niche, but the people using ritual-based activism to get us to think differently about who we are in the context of climate change, I think will continue to grow. So for example, we see this with Extinction Rebellion right now in the UK, and that's really blowing up. So I think we will continue to see more of that. And so I guess to answer your question directly is, hey, if we hung out in 5 years and had the same question, I would not be surprised if we see more of this on the margins at least, and in 20 years, it's much more mainstream.
I was going to ask you about the big picture, sort of what comes out of it, but I think you've already answered it in some ways. That's that Reverend Billy and the Church of Stop Shopping can be looked at as sort of a forward, sort of cutting edge, bleeding edge movement within something which you think is going to become increasingly important in the contemporary world. It seems like your research is really apropos of what's going on right now. I should add, for those watching this, might be watching it at different times, we're recording this in March 2020 in a quarantine lockdown.
Yep.
But it seems like your work is really apropos of our moment now and perhaps even in the future.
Well, thanks for that. And I think more so Reverend Billy for sure is, because remember, he's also critiquing consumption, consumerism, mindless consumerism, and how our whole governmental structure is built to support that, and the siphoning therefore power and profits upwards. And so I think this lockdown, this quarantine, I hope we are going to re-question what is a good life, what counts as success, because I think we're seeing that the dictates of neoliberal economics are wrong, right? It's taken 3 weeks of a virus to basically prove they've gotten it really wrong in many ways, right? Central pillars of academia just flat out have gotten it wrong for decades now. And I think that's what Reverend Billy has been trying to say through his ritual creations, through his preaching, his prophecy. So I think the other parallel track to that is climate change is not going away. It's only going to ramp up and get worse. And yeah, I think how are humans going to respond to that? Well, that's the open question. And Reverend Billy is one track of that, of concern, of prophetic concern. And I think you're right, Ben, and we probably will see more and more of that in different ways, in different communities.
So what are you working on now?
Oh, geez. Trying to entertain my kids because we're just like you, right? We're all homeschool teachers now. And yeah, just trying to stay healthy. So everybody watching this, whoever you are, please stay healthy, stay home. Hopefully we get on the other side of this and redefine what community means to ourselves. And I think that's what I'm sort of thinking through, Ben, just like you, is what is the role of the intellectual in that? What is the role of solidarity, of mutual aid? How can universities become a space of being better community partners, helping redefine what a good life is? I don't think we can keep on with what we're doing. Environmentally, we knew that, but given this with global supply chains, linear production, clearly it's not resilient or sustainable. More in terms of my scholarship. So those are the questions I'm bringing into my teaching right now. My scholarship, I'm almost through with a book project with Lexington Books with Richard Karp is the series editor of The Body and Religion. So I'm asking, I'm taking a material feminist, queer ecology, energy humanities, religion, nature, performance studies lens, throwing all that together and looking at the impact climate change is going to have on actual physical places, and therefore what the production, the performance of religion through our embodied bodies will be in those places. So for example, I'll just throw it out there. The data suggests Mecca, the Arabian Peninsula, will be about 150 degrees Fahrenheit 20 or 30 years from now, given trajectories. What does the physical practice of the Hajj, a central pillar of Islam, mean when it's that warm out? Like that's Joshua Tree National Park right now. How do you get millions of humans there in that environment to do the ritual of the Hajj? I don't know if it can be done. It's an open question, but I think as a community of scholars, we're not asking those questions. We're still so siloed as academics in religious studies. So I'm sort of bringing in these other realms of thought, combining them with my religion and nature training and asking, okay, we're going to have regime shifts from climate change. What happens if your place of worship is going to be underwater in 30 or 40 years? Who are you going to be as a religious practitioner physically in that space then? These are the sorts of questions I'm thinking through right now. And so I'm 2 chapters away from wrapping up my manuscripts. It'll go out for reviews. Hopefully in 2 years or so, you all will see this book out there. It's kind of heavy stuff to write about. I'm not a fan of the topic in many ways, right? Because we're just like you, if you're teaching this or anybody watching, this is heavy stuff, but this is the data. And I think it demands us to speak truly to what the data suggests. And we have to change our scholarship and the questions we're asking and the value, therefore, we're bringing back to our communities.
Heavy stuff, as you say.
Yeah.
We've got to do it. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, thanks so much for talking with me, Professor Todd LeVasseur.
Yeah. Thanks for your time.